How's the sound? Just trying to get the lighting up and running here, so it's gonna be a second. You know, a couple people had questions about the Raspberry Pi. We're gonna see if we can look at that too. Questions about the Raspberry Pi. Let's see if we can look at that too. Okay, bringing up the screen here for you. So here's the workbench. It's a little messy right now. Bringing up the screen here for you. So here's the workbench. A little messy right now. Sorry, I had to turn off the echo. Okay, so what questions you guys have today? Let me grab the Raspberry Pi while I'm talking. So a new Raspberry Pi came, and I've been testing it for the last couple of days, and it looks like you can run a Raspberry Pi Zero with it's Raspberry Pi Zero version 2. So this is what it is, and I'll pull it out of the box, or at least I hope I will. Here we go. So there's the Pi Zero 2, and it'll run an actual printer. So let me show you the container. Now there's a little cooling set of fins you can put on it, but there's no rush for that right now. And you probably want to use a 32 gigabit SD card. Now I haven't yet gotten it to work with 64-bit, but 32-bit does work. Let me just get this little container open that I apparently don't understand. There we go. So there's a 32 gigabit drive that we can use with it. So we're probably going to have to use a special power supply that comes with this kit, and it's the Canva power supply that was in the box. But you could buy just the Raspberry Pi if you have your own power source, and it costs $15. So it's reasonably priced. I haven't done a lot of experimentation with the clipper configuration because unfortunately I do have a day job. but hopefully over the next couple days I'll be able to sit down and work on it. So now that I got all the packaging out of the way, let me show you the process to do this. So you're going to need a drive that you can plug this into, and you're going to plug it into right here. Then you're going to plug this into your computer, and I'm going to bring up the actual imaging software in a second. So it'll be Raspbian that I'm going to use, and we'll see if we can do a clipper setup live. These are usually messy, so there we go. I got to bring up the imager, so give me a second. And also to bring up FileZilla. So I'll show you what I'm doing in a second. I'm just setting the screens up. So if we, oh, you actually saw me setting the screens up. So in Raspberry Pi, we have to choose the OS, and you're going to use custom. And then I have the Octopi version 18 or 018. This is an image that you can get off the internet. And then you're going to choose your storage. In this case, it's called Octopi. And then you're going to write. And this might take a second, so you're going to have to overwrite whatever's there unless you don't want to. And that'll image for a second, so I'll check on questions while that's going on, because that's going to take probably 5 minutes, maybe less. But let's switch over to the desk, and you can see what I was talking about when I forgot to change the video. So this is the Raspberry Pi Zero version 2, and of course it doesn't want to open for me easily, so give me a second. So this is a quad core processor, and then of course you have ports for your power, your SD card, you got your quad core, then I think you have your what is it, Wi-Fi in here someplace. But we can look all those up. There's a camera connection that you can use that I tested, and that works. And then you have 2 ports. I might have my power confused. Yeah, I do. Power's over here. And then over here is your actual HDMI and then your USB. So one of the problems with this is running it on the Raspberry Pi Zero is that you only have one USB port. So there's a solution for that I'll pull out so you can see it. Give me a second to search for it here. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. I may have left it in another box. That's awesome. But essentially, you can plug it into a hub after you use the converter, and then have multiple connections. So in this case, I'm trying to find the hub, but it's not in this particular box. So I've been organizing my apartment for the last couple of days, so things are not where I left them. Okay, it might be in a box in the other room. Let me just check around here. Yeah, it probably is. Let me double check this box. Yeah, it's definitely in the other room. So essentially, when you connect your USB breakout for your hub, it'll go here, and there's a special connector that you need. I think I have one of these laying around, but I have to check. So there it is, and then you have a connection over here that you can use. So without the hub though, it's not really of any value at the moment. So we'll just leave that there for a second. And we'll check on if the SD card reader is finished on the desktop. So it looks like it just finished. So we'll continue, and we have to pop out the drive for a second. So what you're gonna do is this. You're gonna take it out, and then you're gonna place it back in. Then you're gonna go back over to the desktop, and you're going to find the drive. In this case, I have to look for the supplicant file, right click on that, and open it with Notepad++, not Notepad. And I'll show you what it looks like in a second. I just have to reopen it because it's got something in it that I don't want you to see yet. So here we go. So what you're looking for in this case, I'm using a Wi-Fi router. So it uses WPA2 and WPA. So you need to remove the comments. This is so we can actually communicate with it. Then put in your SSID, being the name of your router, and then your password. But this part I'm not going to show you on the screen, only because I don't want to share my password. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to go over to my downloads file. I'm going to rename this after I copy it and paste it back in here. And I'm going to name it the name of the other file, which is down in here, and it already has my settings in it. And hopefully this won't be a mess. So I'll click on rename. I'll copy the whole name of this. Then I'll go back over to my downloads folder for a second. I'll rename the second one, and then paste the name over the whole thing. And then I'm going to copy that over to the D drive and replace the one that I currently have. That way I'll have the configuration. You can also do it this way by right clicking and saying send to, and then pick the device. So now that that's done, I'm going to pop the drive out, power it, and see if we can see it on the network. So I'm going to go over to the workbench, pop out the drive, and then slide it in here. Now we're probably going to have to do an update, which I might be a little bit lacking in my memory of what I did for it, so I'm going to have to look it up because I took notes on this. So I'm going to plug this in, and that's going to power the Pi. So I'm going to put some putty underneath it so it doesn't slide all over the place. Well, let me put some putty in better places. This is why I usually pre-record these and lock it to the board. There we go. There's a little bit of shine on it. So that's going to take a second to boot. While that's booting, we're going to have to go over to the desktop again. And we're going to see if we can see it on the network by going to the command line. So CMD, enter. Hang on a second, I've got a call coming in here that I need to mute. And we'll see what we can do. Normally I have my phone so that people can't call me, so let me fix that real quick. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if we can see it on the network by doing an ARP. So we're going to do ARP, A-R-P, minus, oh, hang on a second, minus, after a space, A for all, and it shows us what's on the network. So right now it's just seeing the computer. So I've run into this problem where Windows won't allow you to see it unless you go to your router, because I'm sure it's logged into the network, or I'm at least mostly sure. So we'll ARP again just to make sure. Then I'm going to start randomly pinging things, being 192.168.1.2, which should be possibly this computer. I'm getting a response, so let's check to see what this is with ipconfig. That would be this computer. And let's see if we can find out what our IP address is. We're 1.3, so 1.2 might be the Raspberry Pi, but I'm going to ping one other thing, or two other things, just to make sure. So 1.4, there's no response, so we'll hit Control-C. Then we'll do 1.5. I recently reset my router, so I don't know where things are. So I'm getting pings. That looks like it might be the Raspberry Pi. So what we'll do is we'll go over to the browser. And let me open an instance so you can see. And we'll type 192.168.1.5 and press enter and see what happens. This, in theory, might bring up the Raspberry Pi, or we'll just be sitting here seeing what's going on. So let's give this a second. There we go. So we're on the setup wizard. So we don't have anything to back up, so we'll go next. We don't need this, so next. And then we'll do Pi, and then Raspberry, and then Raspberry again, and then we'll create an account. We're not going to care about that right now. And then next. So here we can test to see if we see it by name resolution. Name can be resolved, so we'll go next. And for some reason I have something else to click. Enable connectivity, that's why. So next. Then enable anonymous tracking, I'm going to disable that. Then next, I'm going to enable plugin blacklist processing and go next. Now I'm going to give it a different name. I'm going to call this Octopi 2. And we don't really care what the model is, so some printer. And then we'll go next. And then we'll say finish. So this will give us an environment to work with. Now we can actually connect to an actual environment. Let me make sure you're seeing what I'm doing. But the first thing I always like to do whenever I download something new is go over to the little wrench and we'll check to see if we're up to date. So it's going to take me a second to remember where it is. Software update. We'll do update all. These might be current, so it might not have anything. So we'll check for updates. It says everything's up to date, so we don't have to worry about it. So that's the first step to getting your Raspberry Pi up and running. Now if you want to do a thing for Clipper, you're going to have to go in here and you're going to have to find, let's see what we got here. Plugin manager, get more, then type Clipper, and then enter. And it should be this one right here, Octo Clipper. And this may take a second to install. And I'll check on questions while that's going on. Hey Steve, or Steven, pardon me. Hey Marcelo. Let's see, are there any features that pique your interest in Clipper? Clipper is a faster way to print. So it reduces the instruction sets so that it moves the processing onto a faster processor. So currently the processor on the Raspberry Pi is actually 64-bit. Granted, it's running a 32-bit operating system at the moment, but there is a 64-bit version of Octopi. At the moment though, Octopi, let me reset this real quick. Octopi apparently for 64-bit involves a couple more steps to get it set up for Clipper. And I haven't tested enough with it yet, but essentially what you need to do is enable, I think it's open SSH, whereas this is default SSH, so we can remote into it with the TerraTerm session. In the 64-bit version of Raspberry Pi's operating system for Octoprint, being, I forgot the name of it, I think it's Ubuntu, you're going to have to do a little bit more work to get control of it remotely. So let's see, I have a question on the new Marlin. Do I set the serial port 2 to 0 for the TFT 70 screen? And what do I set the serial port 3 for my Wi-Fi? You can do that, but I'm not sure. You're saying it's for an SKR? Or is it for some other board, Michael? Let's see. BL Touch, we might not be able to do tonight only because I have to wait for the city inspection of my apartment. So if I take out too much stuff, they might get a little upset with me. I might do it later in the week. Maybe I'll do a stream tomorrow or Friday. But right now, space has to look clean in my apartment. So it's going to be a couple of days before we get this inspection thing squared away. They were supposed to show up yesterday, and they didn't. So I've got to wait till tomorrow for them to try again. So on this one, I think we're ready to proceed. So let me clear that real quick. So restart in progress. This will come back up and change the icon, but we're going to remote into this after it reboots. So I'm going to go over to something called TerraTerm. I highly recommend this over anything else. You can see the IP is already set. It's set to SSH, which is Secure Shell, and it's on port 22. So Secure Shell versus Telnet, they're different. Telnet doesn't have any security, so it's not ciphered, whereas this involves keys and possibly ciphering the communication so it can't be read by a third party. So I'm going to click OK. Then I'm going to say continue, and then I'm going to put in the Pi for the username, and then the passphrase is raspberry, and press enter, and it looks like we logged in. So we're gonna have to do an update, and I'm rusty on what the update command is. It's apt-get update or something. So I'm just gonna Google Raspbian Pi apt-get or apt update command. I might have it wrong, I might have to look it up, but let's see what we get. So there's a command that'll allow you to update your actual Pi, and you're gonna have to do, I believe, sudo apt update. Let's give it a try. I might have it wrong. Let me see if I can actually highlight this. And sudo is actually super user. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to paste it and hit enter and see what happens. It's asking for the password, so I'll say raspberry, enter, and it'll begin to update. I'll say yes, and this will take a few moments. Yeah. Sometimes I forget what it is. It also, there's upgrade, but upgrade at this point might be a little bit more dangerous because I I don't know if it's going to swap it to a different OS or swap something about the OS. In this case, probably not, but it's easier to do an update for the moment. So after this updates, we're going to have to figure out in Clipper how to do this. It looks like it finished, or at least I hope it did. Let's see what we got here. So if you don't think it's worked the first time, you can always do it a second time. But while that's going on, we'll go over here and we'll go to Clipper Install. And inside here, we're going to have to find the actual website for Clipper. And then there's an installation instructions. So over here, they go through them. I'm going to change some of these steps around. But essentially, we have to do these two commands right here. Git is like SVN. It's a checkout from a repository. And then this is running a shell script denoted by the slash and the dot before it. And it ends in sh being shell. So I'm going to copy both commands, and you'll see why in a second. The reason that I like working in TerraTerm. So I'm going to right click and paste them, and then say OK, and it should stop on this command and ask me to hit enter. So essentially we're grabbing the information for our build of Clipper. And I've actually never done Clipper on the Raspberry Pi Zero, so this might be interesting. And then eventually we're going to have to set up an actual build, and I'm not sure which board you want me to try. I can try any one of the boards you can think of that I have. So if anybody wants to post a board name for the type you want to see me do for that particular OS, we can try that. I might stumble and bumble at first, but let's hit enter on the shell script to install it. This will take a second or two. SKR 2 would be cool. Okay, let me see if I can find that real quick. That actually might be in the printer at the moment. So let me, actually we can't use that one because I don't have it. It's actually in the printer on top of a shelf right now. So how about we do SKR Pro version 2 or 1.2. I think it's the same processor, but we'll look it up. Hang on, I gotta find the board. Essentially, they're gonna be similar, but different. So the processor on this one is an ARM processor, which most of them are. So let me put that down on the table and we'll check that real quick. So for this one, we'll go over to VS Code because this is going to take a second. We'll open this up and we'll see how similar they are. So I'm going to go to my downloads and look at Marlin as a cheat sheet. So I think this Marlin will work. And all I'm doing right now is checking the processor types to see if they match. So I believe it's the STM32F4. And we can search in here for SKR underscore V2 or 2. So that's in there. So let's check on Pro. So the installs are going to be very similar because they're using the same processor. There's going to be a nuanced step to it that I'm going to have to figure out. But let's see what happens. We're almost done with the download. Yeah, unfortunately I have two other SKR boards. One of them's in the install that we did like 2 weeks ago before all this inspection stuff started. So as soon as that gets sorted out, hopefully at 10 a.m. tomorrow, I can start bringing stuff back into the mix. But they walked in and they thought it was some kind of concerned because they saw wires that they didn't understand what they were for, being the heater cartridges. I think they thought they were blasting caps, which they're not. So this is almost complete. So as soon as this is done, what we're gonna do is find the next direction. Excuse me. And it's asking us to CD or change a directory. Then there's a tilde, which is a shortcut, and it says go to the clipper folder. Then it's going to say go to the make menu config, and that's where it's going to get interesting. So I'm going to copy this command for now, and we'll see how far we get over here. So it looks like it's unpacking something, or probably unzipping something. So let's give that a moment. I'm not sure of the timing of this. It's going to take a second or two probably. Let's see. Just me watching is all. Let's see. So let's see. Back to my question. I have an SKR 1.4 turbo. Been put in the new Marlin. In it, I know the serial I port or -1 and serial 2 and 3. I don't know what to put it. So what you're trying to ask is which one do you want to use? In the case of the board, it's going to be -1. For the next serial port, I think it's 1. And then if it's not 1, try 2. And then for the third serial port for Wi-Fi, that can get a little bit fun. I don't know that one off the top of my head, but it's not probably going to be those other two numbers. Let's see. I don't know what this is about. I saw it too. Oh, a lot of you people are first time here. Basically, it's a Q&A hour. Unfortunately, I worked a full day today, so I'm stumbling and bumbling a little bit here. But let's see what we got going on here. So this looks like it's finished. So let's hit enter. Nope, it's not there yet. So as soon as this finishes unpacking, we can actually do a little bit more. I'm actually agnostic on it, meaning I see the advantage to both. Marlin has been around for ages and is really stable, whereas Clipper, if you want to run really, really fast with the printer, for something like a Delta type printer, it has its advantages. So that's one of those things that will be useful if you're using a Delta, and it speeds up the instruction processing and takes it off the actual board's processing. So once that, let's see, you're building a BLV cube. Well, I have to look up what the BLV cube is. So let's see what's going on here with my computer. Apparently either something's unzipping forever or it's not complete. So let me do a clear screen. I don't have a prompt yet, so it's still hung. And it looks like it's still working away. So you've been working on the firmware today? What have you been working on for the firmware? So the Core XY printer. So Core XY, I have to actually look at the design, but I'm thinking it's similar to something else. So Core XY. I need to see an image of it real quick here. Okay, so it's got 2 Z-axis, and then it moves along a carriage up here. So set up which firmware to use. I would start with Marlin, just so you understand how it operates. I don't know what your experience level is. Are you just starting out 3D printing, or have you been doing it for a while? So you've been doing it for a while? Sorry, I know there's an 8-second delay. Okay, there's going to be a lot of eccentricities with setting it up. What you can do is basically it's very iterative. So when you set something up, you're going to make... Okay. Essentially, you're going to have to figure out what things are breaking by using the power supply. So what I like to do is keep my hand on the power supply. If an issue occurs while I'm testing something, like I home an axis and it goes the wrong way, then I flick off the power on the power supply or pull the plug. And then I go into the firmware and change that setting. So there's various settings in the firmware. So if I were to bring this up over here, if we were to go to configuration.h, and let's just say we're going to search on end stop. So down here we have end stop settings. If you were to test the end stops, and in your case it comes up incorrectly, being it's true instead of false when it's not triggered or when it is triggered, you're going to change this and then basically recompile and reload and then verify it's correct. Then the next thing would be inverting the axis. If it's going the wrong way, you can type invert, and you have a bunch of options for inverting. This is obviously for end stops, so we're going to avoid that. So we'll go down a little bit further and see if we can find it. So down here we have a bunch of different ways to invert, but these are the directions. So if it's going the wrong way in the x-axis, you turn it to true from false, and that would flip the direction. Let's see. Yeah, you had to do that many times. On setup, my ANET A8, and let's see, on your SKR Turbo, my Z crashes into the table. Is there an end stop on the Z-axis, or are you using something else to detect the actual surface? So when it's going towards the surface of the printer for homing Z or the Z axis, do you run into a situation where you're using an end stop to stop the axis from going down, or are you using something else like a BL Touch? Yeah. Okay, now I see where you're going. Essentially, you understand the iterative process then. So you have TMC 2209s. Now on the Z-axis, I don't know how well the TMC 2209s work. In theory, it should work. But in practice, I don't know. So what I'm trying to say is you'll probably have to play around with the sensitivity of your Z-axis, which is going to be in here. So if you go to Configuration Advanced and you search on sensorless, down here you can see that there's a Z stall sensitivity. Now I don't know if you have two of them, but essentially you're going to have to remove the comments, and I believe the magic number for this is going to be 125. You may have to go higher. This is actually for the SPY type. That's the midpoint where it stops for sensitivity. So what you may have to do is tap it with your hand while it's going down and make sure that it stops. If it doesn't, you're going to have to make it more sensitive. So you can see the highest sensitivity is 255. That's probably not going to work. So you might have to bump this value up to like 145 and see if it works. If it's too sensitive when it tries to move, then you're going to have to lower the number. Oh, you're not using a TMC 2209 on your Z-axis? So BL Touch is a different story. You have to make sure that you have it set up and it acknowledges it. Now the testing on my older tutorials, they've changed the way they implemented it in Marlin. So the steps are different now. So if you search on BL Touch, one of the ways you can set this up is obviously remove the comment. And then you're going to have to probably do safe homing, which I don't remember if I got the name right. So we'll try safe_home. So Z safe homing. So we'll search on this real quick. So you're probably going to have to enable this. I just don't know where it is off the top of my head. There it is. So you remove the comment there. And then there's probably some other things that you're going to have to consider for Z safe homing, like the type of bed leveling you're going to be using. But I would wait and first compile to see if this works. So in this case, let me compile this real quick. There's probably going to be some errors. This is on an MKS Gen L version 2, so it's similar to the SKR version 1.4, except it doesn't have a TFT display. So that looks like it works. When you try and home though, you have to do a double tap for the BL Touch with your finger to just test to make sure it's working. So it has to be one after another, and if it stops, then you've got it set so it can actually sense correctly. The actual M119 might not work. So after you get that set up, then you have to pick the type of bed leveling you want to use. And I think unified bed leveling is what you want. If I can spell. So there's 3-point, there's bed leveling, linear, and then there's UBL. So one of these actually works really well. I think it's linear bed leveling, but it's been a while since I played with it. The other one should work, but it's a little bit harder to set up. It might be bed leveling UBL or unified bed leveling. I have to check that. Hopefully I can do that later this week. So your Z probe is working is what you're saying. But before I can get to those, I have to fix the serial port issue. Serial port issue, I would start first with your default serial port, which is the one that connects to your actual printer. And I would check it over here by doing a search on motherboard. Then I'd go up and I would set first this serial port for your board, and then obviously the baud rate. And then on your screen, for this one, it's probably going to be 1. So you're going to remove the comment, change this to a 1, and try and rebuild. Let me change this to an SKR configuration real quick though. So I have to go to motherboard. I have to change this around real quick. So I'm going to do SKR 1.4 turbo because that's the same for platform.io.ini for the processor. So I'm going to look in here under source, core, boards.h, search on SKR _ 1.4. I'm going to copy the actual turbo version, and I'll show you why in a second. Let me go to configuration.h, paste it here. If I go to platform.io.ini, they share the same processor type. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this, and then I'm going to build. And we'll see if this actually builds first. And then I'll get back to, well, I've already set the port. So if it fails, then I've got the wrong port. If it doesn't fail, I've got the right port probably, and I can grab an SKR Turbo to show you that. Okay, that's the SKR 1.4. Give me a second to find the Turbo. E3 1.3. Here's, I think, the turbo. Sorry, I gotta read the stickers on them. Yeah, it's got turbo in the center. So let me move this over on the table. Sorry, I'm cleaning up the table, so give me a second here. Essentially, I've got to grab a display, so I'll show you what I'm doing in about 2 seconds. I just have to lock a board onto the table so it doesn't slide around on me. It's kind of a safety thing for me. So I'll show you now what I'm doing. So if I go over to the workbench, I'm bringing out a turbo, and the reason I know it's turbo is it says turbo. This is essentially the predecessor to the SKR version 2. Now I need to grab an actual display and a cable for it, and the display I'm going to use is just one I grabbed, which is probably going to be, sorry, this is on the top shelf. In this case, I'm going to be using a TFT version 2. But to do this, we got to check the actual information on the board. So what I like to do is actually go over to my browser. And in my browser, I'll go over to BTT GitHub, which is Big Tree Tech. And for this particular board, it's the SKR Turbo, so it would be SKR and then 1.4 or the 1.4, or actually it's on the front page now that I think about it. It's over here. So if you click in here, there's 1.4. Then we have to find, hopefully the, it's not there. Normally I go by datasheet, but the way they set this up, it's not that. So we're gonna have to find the picture of the hardware. So we want the pinout diagram. They're the same for both the turbo and the 1.4. And the only difference is the processor over here. So we're gonna find the actual pins that we're using for TFT. You can see there's reset, then there's RX0, TX0, ground, and then N power. So that means that we got to hook this up correctly. So I'll show you what the cord looks like real quick. So on the actual workbench, this is the reset pin. So we know reset's over here. So we have to align this correctly. So it's going to look like that. So we can plug in the first 4 there, plug in this one here, and then on the back of all your displays, it's going to have the RS-232, which is what we're looking for communications, or it's going to say something else. So you'll know that it's not going to be SWD, and so it's a 5-pin connector, so there's a notch on this. So we're going to plug it in there, and to test it to see if it powers, we're actually going to take a USB cord and plug it in. So I got the USB right here. I'm going to plug it in. If this lights up, then it's working correctly. So apparently it might not be working correctly, and we can check the USB over here to see if it's set to it. And right now it is set to it, so there's something wrong with the way I plug this in. So I'm going to unplug it, and then I'm going to look around the board. This board might be FUBAR, but let's see what happens. We'll try SWD. That's powering down the board. So this board might not be actual functional, but let's see. Let's try here. So there's no power on that. So let me grab a different board. There might be something going on with this. Or it might be my cord, in which case I'll have to swap it. So I'm going to grab a separate board over here to test it. Same process. You're going to look on the board. In this case, we're looking for RS-232. So I believe it's that one. They've changed the writing. If this goes off again, then I know there's an issue with the cord, meaning the cable I'm using might have a reverse, which seems to be the case. So I'm going to pull that out. I'm going to power this down, grab a different cable. Let me put that one off to the side. So in this case, I have bad hardware for the cabling. So I'm going to do this again. I'm going to double check the actual configuration. So it's this way. And then this plugs in to the reset. Then I plug in, let's go back to the previous display and plug in the cord over here. Put this down here and power it and see what happens. And it works fine. So it was a bad cable that caused me issues. Now as you can see, it says no printer connected over in here. So no printer attached. I'll show you how we're going to fix that. So we'll go back over to the workbench we'll go over to the desktop. On the desktop, all you have to do is you go in here, change the serial port. Now we've already built this, but we weren't plugged in, so we can just do an upload right here, and this will take a few seconds. So it took 3 seconds to do that. So we'll go over and we'll check to see if it's there now. So it is. So we can go back over to the workbench. We can pull the power, plug it back in. And what you'll see is hopefully it'll say that the printer's attached, but it hasn't fixed it yet. So there's one other thing you can check. So if you go over to menu, then you're going to go over to settings. Then you're going to go to UART speed, and it changed it to 250,000 bits per second. So I'll go back. We'll give it a second. So it still says no printer attached. So let's double check one more time, because we're matching speeds with the board. So settings, UART speed, info, machine. So that's what it is for this particular board. So we might have the wrong number. So we can go back over. Let's just power cycle once to make sure. It's probably going to be the same result, but we can change the number for the serial port in VS Code. So I'll go back over to the desktop. I'll change this second serial port to number 2. I'll try and build it first to see what happens. Hopefully it won't fail. Apparently it's failing. So we know that doesn't work. So let's try 0 and see if that builds. So that looks like it's building. So essentially it's just an iterative process of going through these. So this, in a second, will do an upload to the board. Whoop. It's probably already there. So we can check it right here, and it is. So we'll power cycle the board and see what happens. So we'll go over to the workbench, pull the power, plug it back in, give it a second. Hopefully this fixes it. Now, in this case, well, there it goes. It's all fixed. So that's the issue with the actual USB display, or I'm sorry, with the UART display, is just getting the number right for the second serial port. Then the same is true for the actual Wi-Fi, but the Wi-Fi involves a lot of steps I can't really show you live, because you'll see too much of my network if I do that. But I think the password for it is 0123456789 for the Wi-Fi board. So let me check on the chat, because I've gone off for a bit. Okay, so it looks like it has to be 0 for the second serial port, and -1 for the first serial port. Now, on SKR's website, for their version of Marlin, they might reverse those numbers, but I try and do it the same for all printer boards, so I stick to -1 as the first serial port for USB. So, let's see. Do we have any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, for those that don't know, I actually have a Discord. Let me bring it up so you can see what it looks like. Hang on, I gotta get it over to the other screen. So over here, there's a lot of resources besides myself that can help with sorting out problems. There are a lot of people in here that are knowledgeable, that are more than happy to answer questions if I'm sleeping or unavailable. So all you have to really do is come in here and say, hey, does anybody know how to deal with this? And somebody in here should have an idea. Obviously during the workday, I answer very few questions, but I have a couple days off now, so I might be able to. But you can see that there's a lot of people in the chat, and then there's other rooms where you have BTT, TFT, you have printer quality, BL Touch, you have shared designs, and then Clipper. So for like the BL Touch, I think I put the instructions in the description up above for what the main stuff is that you need to set. So you can see it up here. And it might be, well, I don't know if you can see it all, but at the very top it might be there. I don't remember how it looked. I don't know where the very top is anymore. Okay, there's several conversations going on in here, so apparently it might not go to the very top because it's been around forever. There we go. So right here, you can see the instructions for the basic configuration. And then obviously there's different types of bed leveling configurations and margins. It's been a while since I've looked at this, so let me check the chat. Hang on, I'll double check the link. If I go over here, general chat. Let's see what we got. 2 seconds here. I gotta find it. It's probably gonna be on the channel. Hang on. See if this works. There we go. That's the actual link, I think, to the Discord. Let me know if that works. They have obviously randomized it, and sometimes they deactivate stuff on me. So right now, I think there's like 500 people in the actual Discord for this channel. So there should be someone that's there that's able to help. And for those that are doing super chats that I can't see right now, or tipping, thank you very much in advance. Unfortunately, the chat configuration I have right now, I can't see anything. All I can see is questions. Yeah, sometimes I need to update my links because I think one of them timed out, and I've got that floating around where I keep pasting it. But essentially, there's a lot of people in here that have knowledge that they're willing to share. So, any other questions, comments, concerns? I'll try and do the BL Touch either tomorrow or later in the week, but everything's dependent on somebody showing up to actually look at my hallways and say that everything's good. So that's probably going to happen at 10 o'clock a.m. tomorrow. So I'm going to have to clean up my workstation a little bit here, and hopefully we can catch up tomorrow, and I'll be able to do something a little bit more interesting on the actual workbench. But right now I have to strip everything down so it doesn't look like I've created some kind of odd fire hazard. Has Clipper fixed the issue with the TFT screen yet? Clipper for TFT, I believe, does not work yet. You're going to have to use an older screen like a RepGraph Full Graphics Smart Controller or something like that. But we can check the wiki real quick for what they have. So if we go over here and we look on, well, let's try search. TFT. Not sure they have anything on TFT here, so let me search the page. And let's see, it may be necessary to manually enter the bootloader. This can be done easily with boot 0 and boot 1 high. On the SKR Mini, boot 1 is not available, so it may be done by setting the pin PA2 lower if you flash. This is a bin file. I'm guessing it's generated by Clipper. It's saying to use the TFT headers here, so that's not useful at all. So let's go to documentation. I think we have to go over here. Documentation. Frequently asked questions. We'll search on TFT. There's nothing on TFT. We'll try touch. Obviously, there's only one entry for touch. Let's check releases. Last release was looks like the 29th of September. So last time I actually messed around with this, I think it was September, so they probably don't have TFT capabilities yet. I don't know if they ever will, but you can adjust things in your TFT to send G codes, but I don't know how well they communicate. It's probably easier to use Clipper or Raspberry Pi to communicate with your board with Clipper's extension. But if you're just setting up your printer, I would start with Marlin, get everything right that you like with that, save the bin file off, and then you can play with Clipper. And then if you decide you don't like Clipper, you just reload the firmware.bin that you've stored from your previous build. But let's take a look at setting up Clipper a little bit more. Let's see if it's finished doing what it's doing. So it looks like it completed. So back to the original install that I was talking about. So up here, we're gonna have to go back to the install. So let's see where I am. I think I'm on bootloaders. That's not helpful. So they're saying to use PuTTY. I say to use TerraTerm. They might not know what it is. So what we need to do to set up or flash a board has to do with changing the menu. So if you copy this, you'll change directory. Let me clear this up so you can see. Right click to paste. Say OK. It's changed the directory. So now we can go into the config. Inside the config, it can get really weird really quick. So first thing you're going to do is hit the spacebar to enable. Then you're going to change the chipset. It's, in this case, STM. Or there it is. So you're going to hit spacebar. Now it's set to a default setting. So once you click over here, right arrow, find your processor, which is going to be STM32F4. So we're going to need more information. In this case, we're using the we're using the SKR Pro, but the SKR2 will have a similar process. So what you can do is this. You can go into Marlin and get information about it. It's kind of a cheating way to do it, but it's easy. So you're essentially going to find your source core boards.h. You're going to search for your board. In this case, we're going to search on SKR Pro. And to the right, what you see is your board type and your processor. So STM32F407. So if we go back over to TerraTerm, we can find the 407, hit spacebar, and it sets these settings down below for us already. Now the input communication, I start with USB just because it's the easiest to do. So at this point you can actually exit. So I do Q and I say yes for save. To build, you're going to type MAKE, enter, and this will generate the actual clipper.bin file if it compiles correctly. So your TFT is now working, is what you're saying, Michael? So down here, this is going to finish. Now to get this off the system, the easiest way I found, the bin's going to pop any second here. There we go. So it is completed building. So let's find out what our present working directory is by typing pwd, enter. And you can see that we're in the home directory Pi Clipper. We're going to go over to FileZilla. We're going to type 192.168.1.5. Username is going to be Pi. And then we're going to say Raspberry. And the port's going to be 22. And then we're going to connect. It might prompt us for an OK. So we're now connected, hopefully, or about to be. Apparently not. So access denied. So I don't know what's going on with this over here. That's not correct. It should be, well, secure FTP. Let's try that again. Port 22. Interesting. So I'm going to close this connection over here just in case, and just hit quick connect. Now we'll try port 22 again. I might have to just delete this and do it again. 192.168.1.5. Pi is correct. Let's retype the password as raspberry. Connect. There we go. So either I messed up the password or, yeah, it looks like I messed up the password. So inside of here, we're gonna have to find it. So we'll go to Clipper, and then down in here, our out folder. Then you have to copy this off. So I'm gonna copy this to my downloads folder, which is over here. So to do that, let me make sure I'm in downloads. Looks like I am. You can see it right here actually. So I'm going to copy this over, and then I'm going to go over to my computer, go to my downloads folder, and then down here you can see that the clipper.bin exists. On this you're going to right click and rename it to firmware.bin in order to load it. And then in order to use it, you have to have your thermistors connected. And if you watch my tutorials, I go through the steps on how to do that. So unfortunately, I'm a little bit tired tonight because I've been working all day. So I'm going to cut this short. Say thank you to everyone that was able to watch, and please like and subscribe. And for those that have been tipping via PayPal or Patreon or whatever method you're using, thank you very much. I can't see it in the background, but I am grateful. It's a way to offset the costs to make these tutorials. And everyone take care, be safe, get vaccinated if you can, and wear a mask until this fun is over. And I'll catch up with you all hopefully tomorrow or maybe Friday. So I'm going to end it a little early today so I can catch up on some sleep.